It's Wednesday. It's New Year's Eve. This is Toronto Sports Rush. I'm Kyle. That's Todd. Lots to discuss today as the year comes to a close. And there's a lot happening in all professional sports right now, but we have to start with the sport that's not happening right now, Major League Baseball, because the Toronto Blue Jays continue to be the talk of Toronto, Todd. What do you make of this offseason where the Jays are dominating so much of the headlines in baseball?
We need to see them land the big pieces that will get them over the hump. It's nice to have your name attached to every marquee bat in the free agency market, but at the same time, Kyle, we've been here before with the Jays. They've been used as a stalking horse by agents to try and lure some of the biggest free agents out there to market. But until we get pen to paper, Dylan Cease was a nice start. You get a bullpen arm or two, but are they going to land that big fish to bolster the middle of their lineup and give them a little bit more pop over the course of a 162-game regular season?
Okay, so Todd, if you're the GM of this team and you can only pick one of the superstars they've been attached to, and there's the four of them, which would you pick?
Look, I think Kyle Tucker has the highest ceiling in terms of being that big bat that you want to lean into. So much is made about trying to retain homegrown talent, but at some point, you have to figure out which is the guy that is going to take you from point A to point B. We know progress in Major League Baseball is rarely linear, and the Blue Jays proved that last year, skipping a multitude of steps. But sometimes it's not the most difficult part, getting to that top of the mountain, or I guess in the case of the Jays, a few outs away. But it's knowing you're going to have that target on your back and making sure that you can prove that things aren't a fluke, and for them to be able to do so. Look, I think Kyle Tucker would be an excellent addition if you can plug him in on a game in, game out basis and anywhere from 1 to 3 in that lineup, and gives you an extra big force that teams have to contend with when it comes to grinding out 27 outs against the Jays all summer long.
Yeah, the Jays have said that they favor bringing Bichette back, not favor him over others, but they would really like to have him back. I'm sure behind the scenes they're still trying to work to get both of these guys signed, and then the other guys being a backup plan. I'm, of course, referring to Bellinger and Bregman.
Here's my thing, Kyle. My big thing about Bichette, I get he's homegrown talent, but we know about some of his defensive shortcomings, and you're going to move him potentially to second base. Is his bat enough to offset what you could get from some of these other guys? And that's my biggest concern. You don't want to be cold-hearted. You don't want to be nostalgic on the other end of things, but try and figure out where his skill set is best suited. And if it's a player that can no longer play a premium position and provide pop in the lineup, I'd be looking to try and get the best bat that could add that RBI production to the middle of the lineup above all else.
Yeah, and you got to figure with the other bats around in that lineup, that's not the most difficult role to step into. This is a complete team that was just mere minutes from winning the World Series. We're not talking about a rebuilding franchise in any sense of the word. A contributor to this channel, Keegan Matheson, wrote that there was an article on MLB.com about each team's potential breakout star of the year, and he pointed to Cody Ponce. Is it realistic that this guy actually comes back to the major leagues and becomes an impact player?
Putting so much pressure on a guy that hasn't faced major league hitters on a game in, game out basis worries me a little bit, because the last thing that you want is to create unrealistic expectations that this is the missing link, that suddenly Cody Ponce comes over to the Jays and has a Mariano Rivera type impact to kind of fortify that bullpen and give them an arm that they can lean on late in games. I think you have to be realistic about what some of these guys are going to do, and we'll figure out what the Jays' ultimate starting day rotation, bullpen, middle relief guys look like. He's a nice piece, and I understand the optimism. I'm just not going to go that far thinking that Cody Ponce, of all the players that were out there, suddenly becomes the missing link for everything that this Jays team needs.
Yeah, it would be a nice surprise to have, but it might be a little bit far-fetched for sure. Okay, we want to have a little fun on today's show, given that it is, in fact, New Year's Eve. Let's pick a New Year's resolution for 2026. Each one of us, I'll let you go first. For the Toronto Blue Jays in 2026, what should their New Year's resolution be?
Look, I think we just hit on it. I don't want to be too cheeky here to try and figure out something outside the box, but it should be doing whatever it takes to land that big free agent and to give this fan base a reason to believe that we got close in 2025, but 2026 is the year we push everything across the finish line. The pieces are there. We know there's going to be some regression for some of the ancillary pieces in the middle of the lineup, and everything broke well. But maybe the New Year's resolution is they need to wear the powder blues a little bit more frequently at home to try and foster some of that enthusiasm at the Rogers Center on a night in, night out basis.
I can't argue with that. Those are definitely their best uniforms. My New Year's resolution for them is For the love of God, do not start the season slow. And I'm not saying you need to win 80% of the games out of the gate, but they played almost the entirety of last season without the crazy pressure of the Toronto media. They will be under a microscope from the first pitch of spring training till the end of the year this year. You better come out and win 55% or 60% of those early games, or else you'll never hear the end of it. And who knows if this team can perform the same way under that scrutiny and pressure.
You,
I don't
you
think they
know,
want to find out.
Kyle, you know that media market better than I ever will. I mean, what's the buzz or the storyline going to be if the Jays come out and let's use a 20-game sample size and they're sitting at 7-13? Are people going to push the panic button and say, you know what, last year was a flash in the pan and we can't believe in this team? Or where do you kind of set that threshold over the first 20-game sample size for people to go, you know what, we can be okay, we can relax a little bit. We don't have to worry about any playoff run coming from the Maple Leafs, so the Blue Jays are going to gobble up all of that air when it comes to the front and back page of the sports section.
Todd, if they give up a run in the top of the first inning in the first home game of the year, the panic button will be hit. Let me just leave it there. That's what we're dealing with now.
That's fair. I can understand how things typically can work in some of those markets. Out here in Vegas, we're used to futility, at least with the, I should say, the flagship franchise that is the Raiders. And last Sunday, no greater illustration of people's general apathy towards the NFL product that we see each and every Sunday here throughout the fall.
Nice stadium, though. It's a fantastic stadium. It looks like the Death Star, and everyone can appreciate that as tourism dollars fail to roll into there. Yeah, I think for the Jays, they, after a season in which a team basically can't get closer to winning a World Series, that's an enormous amount of pressure, and they've kind of responded to it in this offseason, but they really do need to get that last signing or two on board. Your resolution's dead on the money. Let's move on to the Toronto Maple Leafs. 4-0 over the New Jersey Devils last night. They've taken 7 of the last 8 possible points. Has this team turned a corner?
Last night, watching that game against the Devils, I think was one of the grittier performances we have seen from the Leafs. And it's interesting they do it on a night where they don't have their 2 biggest, most valuable offensive pieces in the lineup. Those, of course, being William Nylander and Austin Matthews. It was truly the sum of all parts type effort. They were better collectively on the defensive side. They got timely stops from Joseph Woll in net. And I think that's the way this Leafs team has to play. It's that blue-collar mentality and the embodiment of what Craig Berube wants. Do I think it's going to be enough on a night-in, night-out basis in what is effectively, a 15-horse race in the Eastern Conference to try and get into the postseason, given how bunched up it is and how much parity there is? Absolutely not. But at the same time, they have to be willing to do the little things, get to the greasy areas, win puck battles along the wall, and get to the point where your opposing coach, a guy that everyone is familiar with in Sheldon Keefe, starts to call out his own players for not being able to match the Leafs' intensity. It's something that we haven't grown accustomed to, but it's the way this Leafs team has to play on a night-in, night-out basis if they're going to get into the wild card mix and maybe have a chance to steal that 3rd seed in the Atlantic Division.
So they got pretty much right to the threshold of panic time, right? They waited just long enough to start playing well and putting 3 periods together night after night after night. But if they regress to any degree like before over the course of the next month, their season's going to be effectively done. Is this a franchise that should consider starting over, dumping Matthews, rebuilding, or are they not there?
It's a tough question, and it's one I think when Mitch Marner walked out that door, I know Maple Leafs fans weren't exactly happy with the lack of postseason production that they got from him, but 100-point scorers just don't grow on trees. And trying to replace that level of offense, we're seeing now if the Leafs aren't fully entrenched and willing to play a 60-minute game, they don't have enough on the offensive side that can mask some of those defensive deficiencies. I mean, we saw last year that they ran extremely well in net. The improbable performance from Anthony Stolarz, the save percentage that was uncharacteristically high. And when you're getting that high danger save percentage that's above league average, it covers up a lot of the other warts. Well, the Leafs learned the hard way, at least through the first 35 to 38 games of the season, that they can't just show up and play 2 periods, or in the case, I guess, that big win against the Blackhawks a couple weeks ago, play about 16 minutes and go out there and win games. They have to be the better, more physical team for a full 60, because you know what? Right now, when I know I joke about the Eastern Conference, there's not going to be a night off against any of those teams. And when you're playing teams in the conference, every game is essentially a 4-point swing. And where the Leafs are, you can't try and win games after 60 minutes. You have to try and go out there and get that full complement of points, especially against teams in your competitive subset.
So, do you believe that there's a piece or two this team could add in the offseason or via trade somehow, even though they don't really have a lot of avenues to do that? Who would you look for? What type of hockey player, what position, what skill set would you be looking for to help steer this ship and make this team a serious threat again?
I think the one issue that they've had and they continue to have is on the blue line. I mean, you look at the elite teams in the National Hockey League right now, all of them have a top tier puck mover that they can lean on, that can log 25 to 30 minutes a night, and he can contribute on the offensive end. I'm not sure that there's a player out there in the open market that the Leafs are going to be able to pick up. I think at this point, they just settle for getting Chris Tanev to stay healthy and be out there for more than 3 games at a time before he has an undisclosed injury that the team has to really address. That's the biggest thing. Even when they had Mitch Marner going into the postseason last year, and there was a lot of optimism about this team potentially beating Florida in the best of 7, they just don't have that guy on the blue line. And unfortunately, those players don't grow on trees. Out here in the desert, we're extremely fortunate that we have a couple of those guys that you can lean on with a Shea Theodore and Noah Hannafin. You see the premium, at least to some extent, that the Minnesota Wild had to pay to bring Quinn Hughes over there, giving up a Zev Buium, who had a bright future, of Marco Rossi, who was just kind of scratching at the surface. But to try and find one of those elite puck-moving defensemen, I think that's where the Leafs have to go. I'm just not sure they're going to be able to find it in the trade market before the deadline or this offseason. And that's the one piece keeping them away before we even get into the concerns that I think every Leafs fan has in terms of what goes on in that locker room. And is Craig Berube able to really build a roster and a team that embodies that blue-collar style that we saw play such a role when the St. Louis Blues went from worst to first and won the Stanley Cup?
Well, it's a good thing they operate in such a patient media market in which no one's talking about this and everyone's very calm about the situation.
Look,
So
Kyle, it's the perfect time of year. They can sweep everything under the rug with the unveiling of Team Canada for the Olympic roster. They can hope for a World Junior Championship gold medal. So the Leafs are able to build themselves, a 5 to 7 day respite this time of year while the great city focuses on some other on-ice pursuits.
Yeah, and it's going to go over really well that the best Toronto Maple Leafs player on Team Canada will be Mitch Marner, who no longer plays for the Toronto Maple Leafs. But that's neither here nor there. We'll see how he performs. Let's get to a New Year's resolution for the Toronto Maple Leafs. I'll go first this time. And my New Year's resolution is something I alluded to. Just continue to string together 3 periods of hockey on a night in, night out basis. You don't need to win every period, but there was a long stretch of games this year in which they simply were not present for an entire 20 or 40 minutes at a time. And it's not a formula in this massive parity NHL we see in front of us now, Todd.
And I think I'll echo your similar sentiments. I kind of alluded to it, and it's show up on time. It's not hard to show up on time and be willing to play for a full 60. Are you necessarily going to bring your A game on a night in, night out basis? Absolutely not. But show up prepared, be ready from the moment that puck drops. And you kind of have to bring your own energy. I mean, that's the reality we've seen all too often in some of these Leafs home games is they come into a building where if the Leafs aren't the team that wants to be the aggressor, the fans aren't going to provide that extra buzz. So it's got to start in the locker room. It's got to carry out to that opening faceoff. And whatever it takes for this team to figure out who their true leaders are, whether it's on the stat sheet or physicality or something else, show up on time and be ready to work.
Fair enough. Okay, let's move over to the NFL right now. And I'm not even sure where to start this week, but something that's really fascinating to me is the massive flip-flop in odds for NFL MVP that occurred over the course of 24 to 36 hours this weekend. Drake May, now the substantial favorite. Is there value in still taking Matthew Stafford, who might be given this award as a Lifetime Achievement Award?
I think, you referenced it, and we'll say it's the Susan Lucci Award for NFL quarterbacks that eventually to try and cement his legacy. I think voters, if they find themselves at the proverbial ballot box and are trying to make a decision between a sophomore starter and Drake May, who's put up gaudy numbers, but he's done it against a very questionable strength of schedule versus a quarterback in Matthew Stafford, clearly in the twilight of his career, albeit one that's not going to lead a division champion in the Los Angeles Rams, that they may end up leaning on Stafford. And we've seen this all too often when it comes to the betting markets and what the odds suggest. It's not necessarily a harbinger of things to come. If you're looking at the two players right now, I think Matthew Stafford offers all the opportunity and upside. Do I think he deserves to be the favorite? No, probably not, given what we saw, or more importantly, didn't see Monday night in their loss against the Atlanta Falcons, a pretty pedestrian offensive effort. But do I think his price should have drifted as far as it has? Absolutely not. So if I was betting one of these two guys, it would be Matthew Stafford. And look, we still don't know what the Rams' game plan is going to be in the regular season finale. he does get the luxury of playing the Arizona Cardinals. And if Sean McVay puts him out there for 4 quarters, there's a chance that Stafford could throw 5 touchdown passes against an Arizona Cardinals defense that I'm not quite sure could slow down the Ohio States and Indianas of the world as currently constructed.
Okay, but fair enough. Drake May gets to throw the ball against Miami, and Mike Vrabel, there was some talk that he might have been stat padding a little bit for the MVP case last weekend. He'll have the opportunity to maybe do it again this week. Although Miami, they tend to show a little bit of snot against these division rivals in New England, but I think both guys have the opportunity to pad stats, but both teams solidified in the playoff race. Is it worth the risk to leave them out there for four quarters chasing a ultimately meaningless trophy?
You mean running play action from the 1 yard line isn't the best path to trying to get in the end zone like Mike Vrabel has done all so often over the last 5 to 6 games? How dare you try and come with the notion that the New England Patriots could be padding the stats of Drake May? Look, I think for a young team or a young quarterback, you want to continue to play on your front foot. So I'm not sure resting Drake May is in the Patriots' best interest. They still have something to play for if they get a little bit of help, albeit it would take a Herculean miracle of sorts for Trey Lance and the Los Angeles Chargers to pull off the outright upset as a double-digit underdog and allow the Patriots to get to that number 1 spot. Meanwhile, on the flip side of things, I think if you're Sean McVay and you're the front office for the Los Angeles Rams, you're having these discussions with Matthew Stafford, and you have to trust the veteran who's been through the war more often than not. Hey, do you want to be out there for 4 quarters? Do you want to just play a half? Hell, if he just wants to play a drive and come into the playoffs healthy, I think Matthew Stafford has earned the benefit of the doubt, and it should be a decision that they make as a collective, because I'd have to imagine if you ask Matthew Stafford, and it wouldn't just be lip service, if he'd rather win the MVP and risk injury in week 18, or if he try and make sure he can put his best foot forward to win his 2nd Lombardi trophy under center, he's going to pick the latter more often than not.
Okay, let's run through a few of the notable games in the last week of the season here. And it's not particularly notable, but I did notice that the Buffalo Bills, they are currently sitting at -7.5 favorites over an absolutely dreadful Jets team on Bet Rivers right now. If that line being as low as it is, considering the lines that the Jets have given up to other teams recently, is that a statement on where this Buffalo Bills team stands?
Well, it's an indication that we're not going to see Josh Allen out there on Sunday, in my opinion. This number opened much closer to 2 touchdowns, which I think was a major leap of faith from odds makers. And then you find out that Josh Allen, the first thing he did after failing to find Khalil Shakir in the back of the end zone for the 2-point conversion as time expired, ended up in the x-ray room. So I think this foot injury is a bigger deal than the Buffalo Bills are leading us to believe. I can't see a scenario where Sean McDermott puts him out there in harm's way in the regular season finale against this Jets team. And if Josh Allen isn't going to play, at least that's the speculation. We don't have official determination yet. I would work under the assumption that other key cogs will be rested as well. I wouldn't necessarily try and make a case for the Jets as a live underdog plus the 7 now that we're down to that key number. But I do think there is a little bit of opportunity to look to go under the total. I would look for the Bills to run the football early and often. And I think this Jets team right now, the way they're constructed offensively, puts absolutely zero fear even into the Bills' backups.
And there's a huge game in San Francisco Saturday night.
Yeah, and this is the big one. I mean, that we're going to be watching for the number 1 seed. There's not a game that'll be played this weekend that'll have a bigger overall impact on a team's path to the postseason than Seattle, a modest road favorite on the road in the Bay Area. You look at this 49ers team offensively, they've been outstanding, but defensively right now, they look like they're playing the NHL equivalent of pond hockey, just hoping to be able to outscore their opponent, hanging a 40-burger on a week-in, week-out basis. I think Seattle defensively is, of course, going to pose a serious roadblock to the 49ers prospects to get home field advantage throughout the playoffs and never have to leave their home in Santa Clara en route to getting to the Super Bowl. Seattle wins this game. Suddenly the road goes through the Pacific Northwest. And while I don't have the utmost confidence in Sam Darnold's ability to put this team on his back, it does substantially change the way that you would view both of these teams. If I'm looking to pick a winner in this game, I'd lean ever so slightly right now towards the Seahawks. But I do think this total is a touch high. I really expect Seattle defensively to lock down San Francisco a bit more. And I don't think the Seahawks can expose the 49ers defense the same way that we saw the Bears do when we saw them on Sunday Night Football.
And speaking of the Bears, they're an interesting dilemma right now because, they lost that game, obviously, in an absolute shootout, but they showed a lot of weapons and they didn't look no one looks good against San Francisco's offense these days. So very, very tough to hold them to the fire for that. But they have the Lions coming into town Sunday afternoon. Is this going to be sort of a final stamp on what we can expect of this Bears team going into the playoffs?
I think the Bears have an excellent opportunity to do something that none of us thought was possible this season. And of course, the one seed is out of their reach. They've already won the division. But with the announcement on Wednesday morning that the Philadelphia Eagles were going to elect to sit their starters, most notably Saquon Barkley and Jalen Hurts, it gives the Bears an opportunity to go out there, exact a measure of revenge for an early season loss to Ben Johnson's former employer in the Detroit Lions, and secure the number 2 spot. And I think for a team like the Chicago Bears, it's so important that they could have the potential to essentially play home games all the way up to the conference championship. And if somebody was able to dethrone whoever finishes number 1, should it be the 49ers or the Seahawks, that the road to the NFC, if the Bears are able to advance, would go through Soldier Field, can't truly be quantified. So I expect the Bears to come with an all hands on deck, full on effort here, knowing that they were embarrassed way back in week 2 against the Detroit Lions. And it would feel like a full circle moment for a team that is probably a year, maybe 2 years ahead of schedule. And while I may not be optimistic about their playoff prospects with a quarterback making his postseason debut, Caleb Williams will be a name that we're talking about as an MVP candidate going into the 2026 season.
And so we're talking so extensively now about the roster hijinks and the moves and who sits and who starts so much in the last week of the season. That makes it very difficult as a sports bettor, to find value. And I mean, you have to pay attention to things like Allen is sitting and guys that aren't playing and stuff. But where can a bettor find value in the final week of the season, like up and down this board?
It becomes a lot more challenging. I always say week 18 feels much more like the preseason than it does any other week during the regular season. I will say for bettors that do this recreationally and kind of want to check in on game day, focus on the games where both teams are playing for something, because that's going to give you the best path to handicapping the game with something else on the line. We mentioned the big game Saturday night. We know there's plenty at stake between the Bucs and Panthers, although that dynamic changed a little bit with the Falcons upsetting the Rams. That even if the Bucs do beat the Panthers, they're still going to need some help to try and win the division. And the other thing is, when you're looking at some of these big numbers here with teams that are on the outside of the playoff picture, but still playing all of their regulars against teams with something to play for, bookmakers aren't dumb. They're forcing you to pay a premium with the teams that have something at stake. And if we go back to 1990, we have a historical sample size of more than 160 games with a team that has nothing to play for versus a team that has everything to play for, whether it's seeding or something else along those lines. Typically, you're going to find the value in the underdogs. Wait, let these numbers climb. And in all honesty, sometimes you get a few more points of value than you otherwise would at your disposal. The game for me that really stands out in that particular vein this weekend would be the Tennessee Titans, but I would wait. There's no reason to jump in on them catching 12.5 or 13. But if they happen to get to a 2-touchdown dog against the Jaguars, look, this is the Titans' farewell. It's players that are looking to try and secure roster spots, whether it's in Nashville or somewhere else. And it's also a Jags team that hasn't played with this kind of expectations on their shoulders. We saw how tight they were last week against the Colts. The Titans would be a team that I'd take a good, long, hard look at if they end up right in that 13.5, 14 range right before kickoff.
That's a great note, Todd. And give me a New Year's resolution. Pick a playoff team and give me a New Year's resolution for the team, because they only have a month or so to act on it.
Oh, look, I think the Rams, when we look at a team that a lot of us thought was the clear-cut number 1 team in the league, is taking on water at the wrong time. There are some legitimate concerns brewing on the defensive side. And if you're a Rams team, your resolution should be commit to running the football so you can keep that defense protected. Because if that defensive line is out there and they're not operating at full speed, the secondary we've seen have issues in coverage. I know they haven't had Devontae Adams in the mix, but this is a Rams team whose resolution needs to be providing balance offensively and playing keep away, because their road to getting to Santa Clara looks to be a lot more difficult now than it was 3 weeks ago when we thought they were going to have home field advantage and that every NFC opponent was going to come through SoFi.
And mine, Todd, will be to our de facto home team here in Ontario, the Buffalo Bills, and to their fan base. First of all, lower your expectations, because this team's not going to go too far. It is very unfortunate in a year in which the Kansas City Chiefs no longer are a threat in the AFC that they've basically completely fallen apart. And in the new year, I'd be looking to rebuild that squad a little bit, because the way that it's set up right now is not going to get it done. They are regressing. They are not improving. And Josh Allen is relied upon too much to do it on his own, and he needs help. And they need better defense, and he needs better line. They need a lot of help, man. Maybe it's a coaching change. I don't know what else it could be, but lower your expectations, fans, because I don't think this team's going too far.
The one thing we can say, Kyle, for the first time in a long time in Western New York, that when the Bills season eventually comes to an end, whether it's in the wild card round, the divisional round, a conference championship, or should they win the Holy Grail, that there's a little bit more attention that can be paid to what's transpiring on the ice, and some optimism brewing with one of the hottest teams in the National Hockey League. Now, who knew a general manager change could have that kind of impact in terms of on-ice performance?
Fantastic story in Buffalo with the Sabres. I remember playing in tournaments at Saberland in Buffalo as a young Canadian hockey player, a great place to go. Todd, let's close the show on a happy note. We each can maybe discuss, as a sports bettor, what was your favorite win of 2025? Maybe not the biggest one, but which one made you feel really pleased with yourself for having made that pick?
So I am not a big golf bettor by any stretch of the imagination. I'll dabble a little bit in some of the major tournaments. It ends up being donking off a bit of cash. But I'll say my biggest win there, or most memorable, was Ludwig Aubert winning the Genesis Open earlier this year and doing so in somewhat improbable fashion. You know, had a pretty healthy payday with that particular ticket, but it's one that stands out a little bit more than some of the daily grind that is the NFL, college football, and for me, largely the NHL. So not necessarily the biggest score from a dollar standpoint, but it's one that resonates because, look, it's so tough to try and pick a winner in a golf tournament, and you're able to do it at a clip of right around 30-1. It's something that sticks with you a little bit longer than it probably should.
Oh, mine certainly wasn't that wide odds, but for me, it was picking Peter Yan over Merab Dvalishvili to win that title match at, I think he was plus 340 or plus 360 when I took him. And I was pretty sure of that by the time it came to fight day. And I put a lot of units on that one. I'm quite pleased. Todd, been a great year here at Toronto Sports Rush. We thank you for your contributions always. We will see you in the new year. We hope you have safe and effective levels of fun tonight, or just stay at home and do nothing like me, whatever you feel is best for you. Do you have plans this evening, Todd Fuhrman?
You know what? My life out here in lovely Las Vegas on the wrong side of 40 is much more mundane than what it used to be. I've done the Las Vegas Strip way too many times in my early 20s, trying to scramble around to find a bathroom at about 2 o'clock in the morning or losing all my friends and family in various nightclubs. Look, if I even make it till midnight, we'll call it a win because those college football playoff games kick off a lot earlier out here on the West Coast, with a little bit of Oregon, Texas Tech at 9 a.m. Pacific time. So my goal will be just to make it to midnight. But Kyle, I make myself about a $4 underdog to see that proverbial ball drop out here on Las Vegas Boulevard.
I'll take those odds. I know you well enough to know that that is exactly what will happen. Todd, thank you very much. We'll see you in the new year. Have a great year to all the viewers. A great year, what's left of it, to all the viewers of Toronto Sports Rush. We'll see you in 2026.